Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Flames. Today, we are going to be chatting San Jose Sharks with JD Young from Locked On Sharks, and we have a lot to talk about, including their goalie situation.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and today's episode is a fun one. I just was over on Locked On Sharks talking all about the Flames and their, super quiet off season that they've had. And today, JD is here to join us. But before we do that, just remember to subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, give the show a 5-star rating and leave a nice little review. JD, how are you doing?
I'm good. This is the second half of a back-to-back here for us right now. So
So the Sharks.
Pretty quiet offseason.
Yeah, they definitely didn't squeeze like a whole off season into like 4 weeks. They would never do that to you.
No, of course not. Yeah, it is crazy offseason, of course. I've got to start with Doug Wilson, the longtime GM, stepping down in April. He was the GM for 19 years for the Sharks, was very successful during that time, except for the one thing that we're all trying to do, which is win a Stanley Cup. But he steps down. They decide to keep Bob Bugner as coaching staff until literally July 1st. Fire the entire coaching staff. Next week, Mike Greer is hired as the general manager. Then you have the draft 2 days later. Then you have free agency the week after. And then David Quinn is named the head coach of the Sharks, like within a week of that. So it's been a very fun time.
Yeah, and if you really want like more in-depth analysis, I highly suggest listening to Locked On Sharks. Do you feel like this, like they've turned over a new leaf and they've sort of, are giving themselves a clean slate? They're almost done with the Evander Kane situation and cutting all ties with him. Like you said, new coach, new GM. Is this finally time for the Sharks?
It's going to be an interesting time because I still think this core, the front office, they still want to try to win, which the Sharks haven't done on a regular basis in the past 3 years since their Western Conference Finals run. And since that moment, they've been a bottom, third team in the league, and they picked third. They had like the third pick, they had the 7th pick and the 11th pick. So those are all like in the past 3 drafts. So slight improvements, but nothing there. But they're kind of in that weird transition where they have a bit of an aging core. They've been trying to kind of move to a younger core, and then you have a lot of exciting prospects who are going to be coming, but they're not quite NHL ready yet. So, Mike Greer, I think his big thing was trying to come up with a more competitive roster, and he overturned, kind of the bottom 6 of this roster has been completely redone. And that's always kind of been the Sharks' weakness the past couple of years, is this bottom 6 where they're putting in guys who are probably more AHL or NHL tweeners and putting them in kind of big time minutes and kind of big time situations. And of course, they're just not ready, right? And that's not great for the development. One, they may just not be skilled enough, and that's what comes with picking back in the draft from being good. And then 2, just you have so much resources tied up into your blue line with Brent Burns and Marc-Edouard Vlasic and Erik Karlsson. You just can't afford to get quality players. So, Mike Greer, he traded Brent Burns, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a little bit. And they use that kind of space to try to go get NHL caliber players to kind of help fulfill the bottom line, the bottom 2 lines. And with the hope that takes pressure off your top, your Tomas Hertls, your Timo Myers, or your Logan Coutures. Will it work? I don't know. We'll see. I'm very pessimistic on the upside of this team. I think they'll be a more competitive team, but I don't see a lot of upside with this team right now.
Does David Quinn scare you at all? Like the mixed reactions?
Yeah, so I talked to John of Locked On Rangers about him, and there's it kind of feels a lot like Bob Bugner 2.0 in some scenarios where we saw with Bob Bugner, and this is every coach. I mean, Daryl Sutters does the same thing, where especially young guys, and they make a mistake, and it's like, "Hi, Ryan Merkley, you can sit on the bench. We'll see you next game," type of situation, or Jonathan Dahlin, who's not with the Sharks anymore. Like these guys who have high upsides, but their floors aren't NHL caliber floors right now, and I that worries me. But I think you see coaches a lot of times, they kind of make a jump that second job, and I'm not saying David Quinn's going to be making a jump, but I did like the hiring of Ryan Warsofsky, who's going to be the assistant coach. He was the coach of the AHL Chicago Wolves, who just won the Calder Cup. And his approach of like how he kind of develops and treats young players, and had a really great conversation with our friend Sarah Avampado. You can go check that out on kind of what Warsofsky brings. So I'm hoping Warsofsky can kind of maybe help balance that, like, hey, don't bench guys, and let these guys kind of learn, especially what's probably going to be a lost season for the Sharks.
Yeah, and I think that's always good to kind of have someone who can level you out a little bit, keep you on the right path, and obviously hold the guys accountable, but don't punish them. They're still learning. It's a learning process for everyone, and I think that's kind of, I don't want to say the fun of rebuilding, because there's no fun in that. But
we are not rebuilding.
you're retooling. Is that
Retooling, yes.
you're retooling? Sorry,
yes.
But
The 3-year retool. So
it's just kind of like playing like Jenga. You plug what works and you pull what doesn't, or vice versa, whatever. But it's a game. You figure it out eventually. And coming up next, we are going to talk about some of the big off-season moves that I don't know if many people saw coming. Yes, Brent Burns he's out of there. So we'll talk about that next, but first, let's talk about Bet Online. Bet Online has all of your resources and needs for your betting when it comes to golf, baseball, hockey, NBA, combat sports, and more. And you can head on over to betonline.net today to learn even more. There's plenty of things to bet on, from, like I said, live sports to esports to reality TV and politics. So, A to Z right there. And head on over to betonline.net today to see what's going on with all the live props, odds, and lines, and you'll never miss a beat over there. Bet Online, where the game starts. Did you see Brent Burns departing?
Yeah.
You did? Okay.
I called it the day before, actually. The day before free agency. They had to move off one of the contracts, right? So Brent Burns was he had 3 years left on his $8 million contract. And Mark-Edward Vlasic's got 4 years on his $7 million, and we will all perish in the sun before Erik Karlsson's $11.5 million contract comes off the books. But so his contract is the only one that actually you could like get something back. The Sharks did eat, a third of the contract to move him to the Canes, and they got back a goalie prospect. They got Steven Lorentz, who's kind of like a fourth line guy, and then they got a 3rd round draft pick in next year's draft. But like, that $6 million, that's what will let them to kind of go do other stuff. And, there's going to be a big questions of how do you fulfill Brent Burns' minutes? Because, he led the NHL in minutes played last year on that terrible, terrible Sharks team. Was playing 26 minutes a night. And, when especially with Erik Karlsson, who I love Erik Karlsson, but I mean, he's missed a ton of games ever since he's put on teal. How is the defense core going to kind of make up for Brent Burns' abs? That's a lot of minutes you're going to have to make up. So, they went out this season, and like I said, they tried to add quality NHL quality players. They got Marcus Vara, who's 28-year-old defenseman, had some injury issues. Matthew Benning, who's again another 28 28-year-old defenseman who can kind of plug and play right there. And then you're hoping Ryan Merkley can kind of make that jump. He's was their first round pick in the 2018 draft, and he's kind of hasn't you see the flashes, but then you see those moments where you're just like, dude, what are you doing type of thing. So you're hoping that you have just more kind of quality depth of guys who can kind of eat away those minutes, and then Erik Karlsson can kind of regain that first line defensive, pairing form that we've seen flashes of in San Jose, but we just haven't seen it consistently.
Has Karlsson battled injuries? Is that what's keeping him out?
Yeah, so he had, of course, he had, famously tore his groin, his first season with the Sharks. And I still say if he doesn't tear his groin, they're probably beating the Bruins in the Cup final that year. They beat the Blues, and they finally beat the Bruins. They beat the Bruins that year. But and then the next year, he broke a thumb. He had a puck hit his, just like a weird injury where a puck hits and it then they were bad, so they kind of kept him out. He played most of the bubble season, and then last year he tore his forearm, so he had surgery and there. So it's like these weird things where it's it's not like the same thing over and over. Whereas he has dealt with the groin issues here and there, but the forearm is kind of what did him in last year. So yeah.
That is quite unfortunate. I think everybody was rooting for him. I remember Erik Karlsson watch and that whole, how exciting it was for him to be out of Ottawa. Gosh, that feels like forever ago. And like you said, the sun will burn us alive before this contract actually ends.
Yeah.
What have been the biggest changes for this roster this offseason? You mentioned the bottom six just being a complete overhaul. What does that look like now?
Yeah, I mean, so they had a lot of kind of patching it together with young guys last year. Lord Jasper Weatherby, he was like the opening day for C. You had, Scott Reedy played a bunch of games last year. You had like Jonah Gadovich, who played, he was a waiver claim from the Canucks. You've had just like a bunch of these kind of guys who kind of filling in the holes. Rudolph Balcers, who's now in Florida. Jonathan Dahlin, like I said, who's probably going to go back to Sweden now. Kind of these guys who were kind of floating in and out and just never could really kind of claim that position. And, Mike Greer, his big thing is he wants competition and trying to fill this bottom six with NHL caliber guys so that you're not asking your prospects to kind of do too much too soon, right? And then kind of stunt their development or type of situation. So, having, like I said, they traded for Luke Kunin from the Preds, who's okay. They got Oscar Lindbaum, who, they signed him from former Flyer, who, everybody knows the story about, coming back from cancer. And he looked like he was going to be a guy before he got sick, but he still hasn't kind of returned to form yet. They signed Nico Sturm, who was on the Avs and the Wild last year, and then and Steven Lorentz. So, and then you've got Matt Nieto, who's been kind of still hanging out there as well. So, just a bunch of NHL caliber guys. But my big question with them is, which of these guys is like going to be that upside? Like, oh, I could see this guy going from like a 10-15 goal scorer to like a 20-25 goal scorer, and none of them. So
none of them are kind of setting off any bells for you.
No, that's where the hope is. Like William Ecklund, who's gonna, he's gonna be playing his rookie season. Your hope William Ecklund can kind of come in and be a potential Calder finalist, if not Calder winner. Or Thomas Bordeleau, who looked really good at the end of the season last year, but he's going to have competition for if you like in April or May, you were like, oh yeah, Bordeleau is making the team. And then now it's like, oh, Bordeleau's got to fight for that position, especially since most of these guys are on one-way contracts.
Oh man, that sounds too stressful. And, you've had Ecklund on your show a few times. And what is he like for, Flames fans to get a taste of?
William Ecklund is, how everyone knows Tomas Hertl's like pure joy.
Mhm.
Eklund's kind of like the version of that right now, where he's such a nice guy to talk to, and you can just tell how much he loves playing hockey and stuff. And I know he didn't have the season he wanted in Sweden last year going back, but he was kind of put into like a third line checking role type of situation. And I don't think that team was really bad. They went through a GM change. They had multiple coaches, like just a bad team. And Drew Gardens actually was relegated down to the Hockey Allsvenskan League. So talking to him, he is pumped to get back and play in San Jose. And he's ready to burn the NHL down.
The Pacific Division better watch out for when that happens.
Yes.
Coming up next, we are going to talk about a few more changes and maybe a few predictions for the San Jose Sharks. But before we do that, remember to go check out Locked On NHL after you listen to Locked On Flames and Locked On Sharks. You got to keep that hockey fix going through the off season, and don't worry, Locked On NHL has you covered 5 days a week, and they are working through their power rankings right now. So, it's always great to kind of look at those now versus when the season actually starts. There was one unexpected player last year who gave the Flames a lot of problems. A lot. And that would be the one and only Adin Hill. What is he going to be a problem this year? What does the Sharks' goaltending situation look like?
So the Sharks have currently 7 guys on NHL contracts right now that are goalies. James, I'm going to see if I can do this without looking. James Reimer, Adin Hill, and Kaapo Kähkönen, who they traded for at the deadline from the Minnesota Wild. Adin Hill had an up and down season after last year. They traded a second-round pick from the Coyotes, so he came out of the gate pretty strong, but dealt with injuries. I think he played one game after mid January where he came in because they had literally nobody else, and then he got a shutout against the Kings, and then we didn't see him for the rest of the season. So so Kaapo Kähkönen, and then you have on the AHL you have good old Aaron Dell, who's back. You have Strauss-Mann, who is former Michigan goalie. Itu Ikinami, who they got in the Brent Burns trade, and then Zachary Emond. I did it. I named them all.
Wow.
Emond's going back to the ECHL. Dell, Itu, and then Strauss-Mann are all going to be playing on the CUDA. And Dell's kind of like he's on a 2-way deal, so he's kind of your break in case of emergency. So if you need him to play some NHL games, he can come up and play, and then he can kind of be a mentor guy for those young goalies. But then that leaves Reimer, who was magnificent for the Sharks last year, carried them to way more wins than they probably deserved because the dude's everyone loves James Reimer. But Adin Hill, who for some reason just has the Flames number, I think he's kind of the odd man out right now. Kaapo Kähkönen, I thought he played really well for the Sharks at the end of the season. They just gave him a new 2-year contract. Reimer and Hill are both on the last year of their deals, and I think they go into training camp, kind of see how it goes, and then maybe see if a goalie gets injured or somebody doesn't like their goalie depth, and then they try to trade a guy during training camp would be my guess.
That will be very interesting. I am still very mad at Adin Hill for that. I'd go into my episodes and I'd be like, yeah, guys, it's the Sharks, look at where the Flames are, look at where the Sharks are. And then
Adin Hill, yeah.
Yeah. The Flames end up blowing a 3-goal lead. And I'd be like, okay, well, got Adin Hill again. It's fine. Do you think that do you think it'll be Reimer and Kaapo Kähkönen just kind of splitting the games if those are the two?
Yeah, I think that'll be the approach. It'd be interesting to see how David Quinn does it because he has Shesterkin before he was Shesterkin, and yeah. I think they kind of split the games there. And not that I think Kaapo Kähkönen is going to be Shesterkin, but I really like Kaapo Kähkönen. He was the AHL goalie of the year a couple of years ago, and I think, he's still pretty young. He's 24, 25, and I think he's going to continue to grow. And I assume by the end of the year, he's going to be like the guy, and maybe it's more of like a 60-40 split. But I think that is, it's probably going to be a 50. They're going to be kind of platooning in at some point. And I mean, unless you have like a Markstrom or, somebody like that where you can, play him 70% of the games. I think most of the time it's kind of close to a 50-50 split. So
Yeah. With all of these moves and the kind of pending moves, do you think the Sharks are more competitive this year?
I think they will be a little bit more competitive. I still think they're going to struggle to score goals. They were like 27th in the league last year in scoring goals. And like Timo Meier had his best season ever. Tomas Hertl had a great season. Logan Couture is getting older. You have 50 points leaving, walking out the door with Brent Burns. Like, I still think this team's going to struggle to score goals. And I love William Ecklund. I think he's going to be an awesome player, but that's a lot to ask for a guy to just kind of come in and, hey, I need you to score 20, 25 goals as a rookie and type of situation. And he's not really much of a goal scorer. He's more of a distributor and, trying to find that. And I don't know if they have the complementary goal scoring for him to kind of fully, kind of come in and do that. But, yeah, I honestly, I pegged them to be like one of the 5 worst teams in the NHL.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely takes away from my follow-up question, asking if they could be a sneaky playoff.
I mean, if everything goes right, so like they could be a potential like flirting with the playoffs team if James Reimer has like a repeat season, Capo Kakinen has another season, like he kind of takes that next step. If the defense is more kind of competent and then they just kind of grind out every game like 3-2 or 2-1 type of thing.
Yeah.
But there's no margin of error there. And like I said, I know they have more NHL caliber guys like on the roster, but there's exactly what you're getting with all these guys, right? That's kind of my thing is there's no upside swings, and that's why I think they're going to be kind of a bottom of the I think they're going to be the worst team in the Pacific, and I think they're going to be one of the 5 worst teams in the NHL just because I don't see the upside. Like if Timo Meier's like 100-point season and Hertl's putting up 80 points and William Eklund's got 50 or 60, then we can have a conversation. And and Erik Karlsson returns to Norris form, then we can have a conversation. But that's a lot of stuff that's to go right.
Yeah, and like you said, that's asking a lot of all of these players. And
Yes.
Contrary to what a lot of fans think, this isn't just like a video game where you can put it on like easy mode and just destroy your opponents and whatnot. So
I think the Pacific's going to be way better this year.
I was just going to ask if you think like the Pacific will be more competitive this year, because last year it felt like a wash. Like even Vegas was not hanging out where they normally were.
Yeah, I think with Vegas, they're the ultimate like star scrubs team, right? Where they have like kind of like how the old Sharks formula, where it was like we got a bunch of really awesome guys and we got a bunch of Daniel you're taking guys who are just gonna like kind of help do stuff. And I expect them to be better this year. You have McDavid. Right, you've got like they're going to be good with McDavid, and Vander Kane with a full season. He'll be good this season, and then he'll go on his bad behavior after that because that's his thing. So, but I think Vancouver's going to be better. They have a real coach for a full season now. The Kraken with they're going to be fun with Shane Wright and Matty Beniers down the middle. That's a pretty solid start. The Kings are going to be good. The Ducks, I think, are going to be better. Yeah, I think Calgary, sorry, I think you guys take a step back, but like, I think the Pacific's just going to be a better division than this year than they were last year.
I hope so, because like last year when we were doing our predictions and whatnot, it was so easy to say, okay, here's the super not competitive Pacific Division. Vegas wins it and the cards just kind of fall into place. But I hope this year is different. I hope, we do get to see a little bit of chaos and fun, just fun chaos. I don't want to deal with, no one needs any more Evander Kane drama, regardless of what team he's on. Like, he's maxed out his timeout card or whatever.
This
But
drama card, yes.
yeah, he's, buy 9 cartons of milk, you get the 10th one free. He's kind of done that multiple times now. But thank you so much for joining me, JD. I greatly appreciate it. Do you have any predictions or any final thoughts you'd like to share with the show?
William Ecklund, he's going to be really good. I'm not biased at all when I say that. William Ecklund's going to be really good.
I think he'll be pretty great too.
Yeah.
But where can people find you on Twitter, and where can they find the show?
You can find me on Twitter at myfryhole, where I post dumb stuff constantly and make dumb memes. William Ecklund did approve my memes, so that is true. You can also find the show wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, and of course on YouTube as well. So please go click on that subscribe button for me.
Yeah, go subscribe so he can buy the dog more treats and toys. Because
the real co-host, my poor dog Dakota. Yes.
And as always, you can find me on Twitter at JessBelmosto, and you can find the show where you normally find it on Spotify, Apple, and Audible, and YouTube as well.